this part I don't measure. My name is Wendy Ray, and I do gluten-free baking. I think one of my passions in this is that I really love helping and teaching people who have been diagnosed or have a family member who has a celiac or a gluten intolerance or something, and really helping them understand that it's not a fad. And if they have celiacs, it actually kills part of the lining of their stomach. How to not cross-contaminate, how you can support your body through it. I love helping people feel like they can get some control of their life back. You can make decisions for yourself. It's not just everybody else. It feels like it's taken a very long time, and it has. It's been about 10 years of me baking and trying things and things not working out, and things still don't work out, but then I just keep tweaking them. The milk has to be at a certain temperature for the yeast to react correctly. So when I was 21, I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis, and I had several surgeries for it. And then when I was about 27, they told me my hormones were so off that I couldn't have kids without help. And so I just went off of everything. And then my sister had told me about an article she had read about people with endometriosis doing better when they went off gluten. And so I was like, I'll do anything at this point. So before, only morphine would ever take my pain away. And after 6 weeks of being gluten-free, I could take ibuprofen and I was okay. When I ended up having to do a gluten-free diet, I got kind of tired of everything tasting like cardboard. When Scotty and I got married and I started doing some more baking, we lived in Boston for a couple years while he was in grad school, and I was alone a lot. So I would bake. I got my degree in nutrition, pregnant with my daughter, Daisy, and I was trying to build a clientele, and then we started making plans for a gluten-free bakery, and then my dad passed away, and I couldn't really function. My whole life just crumbled. And then he really wanted to help me with the bakery, so it was just hard. The name of my bakery is called Kindred because I want a place where kindred spirits, people who understand each other, knowing that you're getting something that whoever prepared it fully knows what you need. And then also I changed the spelling from K-I-N for kindred to K-E-N because my dad's name was Ken. Life is an apprenticeship, so the baking is the same. There's trials and there's errors. There's things that aren't gonna work, but I figured out what did work. You know, with gluten-free baking, it takes a very long time. If you are praying and trusting God through the process, every day He teaches me new things and changes my life in ways that I was not expecting. I think just life in general is an apprenticeship. I started baking with Daisy. She was 3.5, and she would want to pour things in. So we started that. And then over the last couple of years, she could start doing the eggs. And I think she enjoys making it and then tasting it and being like, we did this together. And this business is not just for me, it's for everybody else. And I want her to feel a part of it. So it's fun to teach her those things. My least favorite part, I'd have to say, is the dishes.
I'm going to do something this morning that I have not done before. I have not done this in all of my pastoral ministry, more than just a few years of preaching. In fact, what I want to do is anathema to Christian preaching. And that is, I don't have a text. for what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to say. I know what I want to say, and I know the text I want from which to say it. But I haven't been able to find it. I've been looking. I've been serious about the search. I've spent time on my Logos Bible software with my hard copy of Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, with my Bible app search feature on my phone, as well as just reading the Gospels, rereading the Gospels, and I still can't find my text. So I got to thinking, my congregation that I love deeply is bright, intelligent, articulate, filled with Bible scholars. You're welcome. So I'll just ask you to find the text for me. I'll share with you my thoughts and the text I'm looking for, and one of you will come up to me afterwards and say, Pastor, here it is. So should I ever have a chance to speak on this again, I'll have the text. Never done it before, but doing it today. Now, there's a specific reason for which I do it. We're in a series entitled Apprentice, subtitled The Lifelong, Life-Changing Journey with Jesus. It's a series on discipleship. You'll remember that last week we talked about the fact that Jesus calls us on our ordinary days to life transformation and unknown destinations. So, beginning today and throughout the rest of the series, our focus is on life transformation. So last week we kind of dealt with the what and the why. What happens? Jesus calls us. Why do we follow? Because His Word is compelling. Now the question is, how do we follow Him? How do we experience life change? How do we live the life as apprentices to Jesus? Now there's something in me that says the speed at which we live our lives has to be somehow addressed with if we're apprentices. And that's what has led me to search for this specific text. I mean, who can contest the fact that we live lives of unhealthy speed? That's no news to anyone here. But some reminders might be helpful. I remember years ago singing along to the Alabama country song. Here were the words: I'm in a hurry to get things done. I rush and run till life's no fun. All I really need to do is live and die, but I'm in a hurry and don't know why. Doesn't it capture life? Think about what James Thurber, the writer, the journalist, said. He said, humankind is traveling too fast for a round world. We're going to lap ourselves, and when we do, there's going to be a vast rear-end explosion. Probably not wrong. Or what about the cartoon monkeys saying to each other, you know, after a day in the jungle, it's just a blessing when one of those researchers shoots you with a tranquilizer dart. It's the speed of our lives. Or what even about Mike Ippolito, writing from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who was caught in that situation many parents, young parents, are caught in on a day-to-day basis. On the way, taking his daughter to school, running a bit late, all the other parents taking their kids to school, they're running late, the traffic, trying to get there in a hurry, gets to the stoplight, it's red, he stops, makes a right turn, and just as he does, he catches that there's a sign there that says, no right turn on red. He says to his daughter in the back seat, oh, I just made an illegal turn. She said, don't worry, Daddy. The cop behind you just did the same thing. We're hurried, we're rushing, we're stressed. How do we live as apprentices? That's why I need that text. Now, I'm going to read you some words from John Mark Comer. I read from Comer last week, his book, Practicing the Way on Discipleship. Today I read from an earlier book of his, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, possibly even a better book. So here's what Comer writes. In spite of our smartphones and programmable coffee pots and dishwashers and laundry machines and toasters, most of us feel like we have less time, not more. What gives? Labor-saving devices really do save time. So where did all that time go? Answer, we spent it on other things. In the 1960s, futurists all over the world, from sci-fi writers to political theorists, thought that by now we'd all be working way fewer hours. One famous Senate subcommittee in 1967 was told that by 1985, the average American would work only 22 hours a week for 27 weeks a year. How's that working out for you? Everybody thought the main problem in the future would be too much leisure. What? Are you laughing right now? Yeah, it's funny, kind of. Unless you're French. To all three of my French readers, we mock you, but it's only because we're jealous. The exact opposite has happened. Leisure time has gone down. The average American works nearly 4 more weeks per year than they did in 1979. Harvard Business Review recently conducted a study on the change in social status in America. It used to be that leisure was a sign of wealth. People with more money spent their time playing tennis or sailing in the bay or sipping white wine during lunch at the golf club, but that's changed. Now busyness is a sign of wealth. You see this cultural shift in advertising. Commercials and magazine ads for luxury items like a Maserati or a Rolex used to show the rich sitting by a pool in the south of France. Now they're more likely to show the wealthy in New York or downtown LA, leading a meeting from a high-rise office, going out for late-night drinks at a trendy club, or traveling the world. A century ago, the less you worked, the more status you had. Now it's flipped. The more you sit around and relax, the less status you have. Not surprisingly, over the same period, we've seen the death of Sabbath in American life. Regarding Sabbath, stay tuned. In the fall, Shabbat Shalom, a series on Sabbath. Regarding hurry and stress and rush, Comer is right. We're in the fast lane and can't find the exit ramp. We're so hyped up we have a hard time sleeping. We're so stressed out our anxiety level rises. We say macabre things like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I got to work right now. And there are social theorists and psychologists who say the epidemic of anxiety that we feel in this country is the canary in the coal mine saying, if we don't find a way to somehow calibrate, to do some withdrawing, we're headed for cataclysmic disaster, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. So I've got to find that text. You're going to help me. Because I have a sense that apprentices have to do something about speed and hurry. So I want to look at Jesus and his life. I don't have the text, but I have some texts I'd like to share with you. Because there's something in each one of these texts that tells me something about this. So I want to go to Mark's iteration of the passage we read last week from Matthew. So we begin with Mark chapter 1 and verse 16, where he writes, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. The part of that passage that jumps out at me today is how it begins. As Jesus walked. One chapter ahead, Mark chapter 2. This time reading in verse 13, once again Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and by the way, that word crowd is ever present in Jesus' life and ministry. And he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. Again, as Jesus walked. A little bit later in that same chapter, verse 23, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. Once again, his disciples this time walked, but Jesus was going along with them. If they're walking, what does that mean about Jesus? He walked. Now let's skip over to Luke's gospel. Luke 24, where Luke is telling us about the risen Christ and how he joins two disciples on their way to Emmaus. Verse 13, now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were walking with each other. They were talking with each other, about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. Time and again, if you pay attention in the gospel accounts, you have an almost leisurely sense about Jesus. Walked, 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 walked. And I'm running. And it gives me some pause. Now, the first thing you might say, accurately, is those were two different worlds. Jesus lived in a dramatically different world back there than we do up here. Granted, that's a fair statement. Although I will say, in some of my growing up years, I lived in one or two countries that valued that much more, even in a modern context. Someone has said, take note of what you say. In one or two countries where I grew up, we could take our car to the mechanic, al taller, and we might say, mi carro no anda. Literally translate, my car doesn't walk. I take my car to the mechanic here and I say, this car won't run. Because that's my world, it's my life. Get it running again. And speaking of the mechanic, used to be I changed the oil in our cars. It hasn't been years, it's been decades since I've done that. Now I pay someone to do it while I'm working, while I'm running. In fact, I'm so busy with that, I'm so busy running, I have no time to jog or struggle for it. That's just the reality of the difference between our world and the world of Jesus. So our temptation is to say, when Jesus is walking, whoa, he doesn't live in 21st century Southern California. So, different world, different reality. Maybe. Because I'd like to take a brief peek into one or two passages that tell us something about the world of Jesus. So consider these words once again in Mark chapter 3. Consider what Mark says starting in verse 20. It says this, then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd, there we have that word again, a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. He's lost his mind. He's lost his sanity. We got to go rescue him from himself. He's not eating. He's constantly surrounded by people. The demands are overwhelming him. We got to go save him. Now, I have a busy life, just like you. But to date, unless she's whispering something in your ear and then you need to tell me, my wife has not yet said, you're losing your mind. Jesus might have been somewhat busy to drive his family to say, he's lost it. We got to save him from himself. Constantly surrounded by crowds. Now, it's not as though he didn't understand the need for some space, some boundaries, some margin in his life and those of his followers. He understood that clearly. Again, staying in Mark, 2 or 3 pages further along, Mark chapter 6, this time verse 30. Notice how Mark records this. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. They're coming back from their mission and they're sharing it with Jesus. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, we're back to that again. He said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. We've got to withdraw. We've got to set some boundaries. We've got to create some margin. We have to get some rest. Jesus himself knows that in his own life and in the lives of his disciples. The problem is, you've read that story, haven't you? You know how it ends. They get in a boat and go away, and people are watching where they're going, and they beat them there. So that when they land the boat, they're all standing there. Hi, Jesus. Doesn't take. I will confess, I at times shop at grocery stores where I don't think I will know anyone. Imagine if I walk in and you're all there. Hi, Randy. Just here waiting for you. That's what happened to Jesus. That was his life. So if you say, oh, it's just a matter of different worlds, that's not the reality. Jesus lived a life knee-deep, elbow-deep in human need, constant demands, consistently being hounded by people, not being able to eat, his own family wondering about his sanity. He was stretched to the breaking point. So, if I could find that text, I would know more about how to be an apprentice in this world. You can help me. Because here's the text I'm looking for, just 3 words long. Here it is. And Jesus ran. And Jesus ran. See, if I can find that text, then I'll be able to study the text, study the language, study the context, notice what's happening. And if I can see him running and living a healthy spiritual life, then I will know how to live the life of an apprentice, running right with him. And Jesus ran. Problem is, I can't find it. And it's not for lack of searching. Now, it's not that running never happens in Jesus' ministry. It happens. There are texts that you can find that say the crowd ran to see Jesus. The crowd ran ahead to meet Jesus. You can find those. You can find examples of people like the small of stature and large of reputation, Zacchaeus, of whom it is said, he ran ahead to the tree and climbed it to encounter Jesus. You can even turn to the parable of the waiting father and the prodigal son. Father who waited on the porch, and when he saw the son staggering toward home, the text says he ran to him and embraced him. And you might even say to me, in that parable, that father figure is God. So God is running after us. I'll grant you that. But it still doesn't give me my text. And Jesus ran as a way to deal with his ministry. So there was running. And it happened. I just can't find that Jesus did it. So what does that then mean for us? What does that mean for our apprenticeship to Jesus? For our hectic, hurried lives? One of the things that emerges from the gospel texts as we read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is that Jesus' life had rhythms to it. Rhythms. Maybe one way to speak of the rhythm of Jesus' life was he had rhythms of engagement and withdrawal. Engagement and withdrawal. This is especially evident in Luke's gospel. In Luke's gospel, time and time again, we see Jesus in prayer, at times all night in prayer. In fact, some of the most momentous events in Jesus' life, such as the calling of the 12, the transfiguration on the Mount, those kinds of events, Calvary, they were preceded by times of solitude and prayer. That's one thing we have to remember. But I want to read you a text again from Mark's gospel today. This is a favorite text of mine, Mark chapter 1 and verse 35. Listen to what Mark records about this kind of rhythm of engagement and withdrawal. He writes, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Ministry is happening in magnificent ways at this moment. Verse 36, Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, everyone is looking for you. What Simon and companions are saying, Jesus, we're hitting our stride. The crescendo is rising. Strike while the iron is hot. This is the time. What are you doing out here in the dark all by yourself? You gotta act, Jesus. But what does the text say? He withdrew to a solitary place and prayed. And then you know what he did? He said to them, we're moving on. We're going somewhere else. And they walked off, I assume. It was this rhythm of engagement and withdrawal. It was a recognition that life would always be hurried and hectic and stressed and busy. But there were necessary times of pulling back. And that concerns me about our life of speed. You know, as I was reading this, thinking about this week, I got to wondering this. What if Jesus had been born, instead of in first century Palestine, had been born in 21st century Southern California? I know there would be many details that would emerge that would be different. But what would his core story be? What would it say about his speed? The more I thought about it, the more I had a really scary thought. Here's the thought I had. If Jesus had been born in 21st century Southern California, and his story were written, in that story, I suspect we would not find the verse, and Jesus ran. It's just the way he lived his life. His engagement with his Father. Times of solitude and prayer. I want to be an apprentice, and I have a busy life, a speeded life. I want to spend my life running. Jesus is my mentor. So while I run, he walks. And then I wake up and look around and say, where's my mentor? He's nowhere to be seen because he's back there walking while I'm running away from him. If I could just find that text that says he ran, then I would know how to live my life running as an apprentice. With your permission, once more, from The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Comer writes, I live in one of the most secular, progressive cities in America. But if you were to ask me what is the greatest challenge to your spiritual life in Portland, I'm not sure what I'd say. And then he lists a number of options. How would you answer that question? I bet very few of us would default to hurry as our answer. But read the Bible. Satan doesn't show up as a demon with a pitchfork and gravelly smoker voice, or as Will Ferrell with an electric guitar and fire on Saturday Night Live. He's far more intelligent than we give him credit for. Today, you're far more likely to run into the enemy in the form of an alert on your phone while you're reading your Bible, or a multi-day Netflix binge, or a full-on dopamine addiction to Instagram, or a Saturday morning at the office, or another soccer game on Sunday, or commitment after commitment after commitment in a life of speed. Corrie ten Boom once said that if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. There's truth in that. Both sin and busyness have the same exact effect. They cut off your connection to God, to other people, and even to your own soul. The famous psychologist Carl Jung had this little saying, hurry is not of the devil, hurry is the devil. I wonder if it means that if I am going to live the life of an apprentice, there are times when I have to slow down. And when spiritually and emotionally and relationally, I must walk with Jesus to solitary places. Because the truth is, constant hurry and stress are poison to the spiritual life. They will destroy apprenticeship. If we don't find times and ways to slow down, to sit quietly before God, to listen carefully to Scripture, to sense the movings of His Spirit in our heart and soul, we cannot, we will not live the life of the apprentice. It's just not possible. I watched our video this morning. was struck by slowness. Wendy Ray pulled out those cinnamon rolls. I could smell them. Could you smell them? Those cinnamon rolls bubbling up. Those cookies, thank you, Wendy. There's still an hour and a half to lunch. I thought as I watched it. But it struck me. She said, it's taken years. It's been slow. As she kneaded, formed them, placed them in the pan. Did you notice when she slipped those cinnamon rolls, she slipped them into the oven, not the microwave? I can almost guarantee you when she turned on the heat, she didn't turn it up to 1250 to bake them in 12 seconds. You cannot microwave cinnamon rolls, not to bake them. In fact, you cannot microwave your journey with Jesus. You must slow down to pray, to read, to think, to listen. So if you go home today, and if somebody asks you, what was the text for the pastor's sermon? Here's what I want you to tell them. I want you to tell them he started out not sure, but at the end he told us where the text was found. This is what the text says. And Jesus walked. Lord, slow us down. Slow us down so that our pace matches yours, rather than trying to make your pace match ours. Lead us to those solitary places where your Spirit forms us as apprentices. In Jesus' name, amen.